day of this combined conference, and last night we had a party, so it might be a bit difficult to absorb the information. Let's talk about API designing in RESTful terms. How many analysts do we have here? Almost everyone. How often did you have to describe API in your tasks? Have you ever used RESTful? Wonderful. Let me try and walk you through a little approach that will make your API more structured, more laconic, and easy to develop. A few words about myself. I'm a reporter in a company that cannot be named. It's not a green color, different color, but still. My main language is Java. I've been using it for 11 plus years. I've been a team lead architect for 6 years. I have experience in DevOps. I also deliver lectures at Bauman University. So I will give you a summary of my knowledge based on my personal cases. A few notes about what constitutes RESTful, how it can be used, how it fits HTTP, what's stateless, and how important it is in microservices. Then we'll talk about OpenAPI, contract first and code first, and in the end, we'll talk about API versioning. What makes RESTful? It stands for Representational State Transfer. It sounds like an incoherent mix of words, but what it actually means is that you work not with a team, but with representations. You are working with an essence. You request it from the server and you transfer to the server a new essence. Counterbalancing it, if you've never used SOAP, it's common base. SOAP publishes methods, you call those methods. Here we work with states and essences. It's closer to the concept of domain zones and microservices. There are 6 principles. The 6th one is pretty weird, so we'll cover first 5. First is client server. Server is what holds the resources, and client is the one who requests resources or instructs how those resources should look. Secondly, there should be a state, some sort of state. There is request A and request B demanding a certain state. There should be sessions on the server side. If there is a session running, we will not be able to scale our servers. Or we could, but it would be reinventing the wheel. Our HTTP provides all the relevant information within a request. If we seek to provide languages in Russian and English, we have content language, accept language. If we need to transfer authorization, there is a headline authorization. We'll cover that in more detail later. Thirdly, it shouldn't matter to you where your client or server are. You use and interact based on HTTP protocol, and you are not worried about how the communication is set up.
So uniformity of interface. There's a common language between clients and servers. So you have to identify resources and also manage the resources. And when I talk about REST, representational state transfer, so managing resources for example, when you want obtaining something, you need to transfer a new state. Currently, it's stateless, for example. It means the communication is so important. Why is stateless so important? When we talk about several servers, in any case, you will have several servers. So if a request comes to first server and the second, and then server, and the sessions are not synchronized, then the second server will know that it has been already implemented in the first servers. So you don't need this kind of synchronization. For example, if you have master vis-a-vis master, well, this is quite complicated, and this is additional load. You may have seen this. This is hypermedia abbreviation. In addition to JSON response, you also tell your communicator what can be done to those resources. I don't think we should talk about this super advanced RESTful. Has anyone of you dealt with this? Okay. And the last one, you can cache. Cache is not an issue, but do it smartly, wisely. There's different caching process in servers. There's also caching in the server. But I think you know that cache is quite complicated. And if a resource has to be updated, then you would think about how to make sure that all those caches, browser, whatever caches, are dropped. Otherwise, the clients will see the old information, which comes from cache. The much power, much responsibility. Now let's talk about HTTP. This is what the rest is based on. Let's talk about methodology and methods. We have this get, patch, put, and delete. Well, this is pretty cool. But get, for example, get is, what does it do? What are the peculiarities of get? If you request thrice for the same thing, you will get thrice the same thing. You cannot create resources with get. It is omnipotent. If you do this thrice, this is 3 times modification, although this is not something that has to do with get. Some clients can run this, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Now, post. This is about creating resources, and then you get to a 1, and location will give you reference to the new resource. And ID will be generated by server. And this is where it is in location. Usually, the complete reply doesn't come in the post because you already transferred it. So all the servers, the fields can be used by server. Put is complete update. Unlike post, that transfers the ID. It can be used as complete update or when the client generates an ID. For example, when you work with mobile devices or some complicated lists on the browser. No patch. This is partial update of ID, so this is partial state. we have a complicated object, we only transfer the fields we want to update. So 200 OK comes back, and it also delete. For example, you do it twice, second time delete, you will be ignored because there's resource in this identifier. I put ID everywhere. That's resource identifier. I don't think we should talk about it in much detail. This is primary key in a database. Unique identifier, which identifies the resource. So if there's some objects that you need to get, then you can work through ID. Stateless. I'm a bit in a hurry because I'll have some examples. I'll try to describe it in more detail. So stateless means that the state is already in the request. What's different? URI, URL. What's the difference? URL is the host. URI is complete identifier of resource. URI contains identifier. When you work with update, then ID in here, because from URL you can see what you're working with. Let's look at what is good and what is bad. Why is this one bad and that one is good? You know, remember the poem, the little kid asking his dad, what is good and what is bad? Query. That's get user's ID equals 1 is bad. ID in the past. This works if you're looking for something. So, query. But this is how it should be. Now, why is this one bad? I would tell you that this is also encrypted. This is doesn't work. How about this one? Shall I joke about chopping hands for doing this? This is categorically forbidden, especially if you do it through one method only. I remember we were doing this and this was complete trash. Everything goes through get, and trust me, when you have one method only in OpenAppium and this description, I don't think people will want to work with you. You can do it through post, then users are in the pass. User is just an explanation of what resource we're using. So in the body you will see information about what you want to do. This is good. This is important because you shouldn't be doing this. Blocking the user. Well, this should go down. This is not potent. Well, you can block it several times, but this is not get at all. If you do it through the query parameters, why is this one bad? Well, parameters can be transferred. No. Well, this looks natural. Post means modification, and this is an transaction. Post can be done without the body query. Without the body query, and delete without body query. Put patch when we create resource must have body. So why this is normal, this is good. If we look at the orders, but here the baseline is user. So I think that this is more obvious, but this is still okay. Now on behalf of user, same, except that this query parameters should be part of the body query, or should be in the past. Any questions? It's kind of resume. RESTful is just a URI suite based on HTTP queries. The unique identification resources coverage is the basis, and you just put everything in the query. HTTP methods is the main element, and everything is on. URI refers to resource, and that's the only thing that can refer to resource, unless this is search. HTTP predetermines the activity or the action. Post means that we do modification. So URI, I mean, when there's something we want to do, when you're dealing with delete, URI should not contain any actions. So we come back to this and you see this is bad, this is acceptable. And I would do this one. Any questions? So now example. We have a user table. This user has several wallets. 1 to 1 and to 1 equals 1. Can you see it? Now, receiving users, don't look at IP1. Why are we using this pass? Information about users. So we go to user resources, and here we come with the list. Any questions? Now, as far as ID-based user, this works in the same way. What should we do if we want to get the user and the address? Then we bring back the address without user, but we want both. Well, you can find in any article what you see on those. This is natural, that you can see it everywhere. But now, what should you do if you have address?
If we do need this, we'll have user1/user/1. This is receiving address based on classifier, but with UI, it will be a bit too difficult to do. That's why we transfer only fields that have been modified. Here it was Romanov, login, Ronin, age 33. Delete HTTP using identifier. Response 204, no content. We could receive an image of a deletion, but I have difficulty imagining that. A receiving user with address. So we write a new address and we receive a different image. Here we work with an image of a user with the address, and in the response there is a inbuilt JSON. Creation. Receiving address is more or less clear, but when you create it, it's different. We create a new user with a new address, and we have only this image, this representation. The question is, what do we do then? First we create an user, and then we create address, and then tie them in, which means that if you happen to be in a subway, the second request could drop off. That's why we handle it differently. We transfer representation and save information from two tables in the backend. Partial update of a user with address is where we transfer updatable fields and receive this. I move to Yerevan, and that's why my information has to be consistent. Moving on. Full update. We use put to transfer full update. In the patch we use the identifier, and in the put we use the identifier. In the post we receive the identifier, but in the ID we keep it in the put. It's a bit more advanced. Handling wallets. I use the customer user-sourced approach. Here we transfer representations of wallets. Select wallets where user ID equals 1 is in the backend. You can also add a wallet of a user. In the wallet there is a name and a type with status new by default. Balance and hold equals 0. Here's a complex case. In get it looks like this, and in the post it looks like that. It's allowed when some of the fields belong to a different business process. Hold balance means topping up your wallet. Status approved. You create a wallet and by default it's not authorized. And you can receive authorizations only for fields that you can update. So what you get is blank response. The transferable representation is different from the representation in the post. So this thing is clear. Receiving ID-based wallet. I think I mixed my slides a bit. The order is all awry. Changing wallet data. Pretty straightforward, similar to what I described. This is important. Here we use with wallets. It's a different representation of user ID. We don't rely or we don't base it off of user. That's why in the response there is a different user ID. So when we change wallet data, we work with wallet representations. We don't work with this type of user one wallet representation. We transfer the wallet itself. I think both options are viable, but when you work with the resource as an identifier, it's better, it's more effective, and it's more logical. In receiving wallets, we base it off of other wallets of the user. It may be transferred through the headlines, and then you know which headers to rely on, changing the balance. Balance change is not a put. This could be called a sub-representation. We change the balance by showing it as a post operation, and then in the body we show what we change. This thing here is not pretty obvious. How would you change a balance in the wallet? It may sound cool on the whiteboard, but if you did it yourself, there would be differences, or you wouldn't have a clear idea of how to do it best. How are we doing for time? Great. Doing fine. Status change. I think I talked you through it already. What we change gets transferred in the past. Any questions on the examples? Because I'm rushing through this, I know. So if you have any questions on a specific case, specific questions, we could meet up where the table tennis is, where ping pong table is. Which one of you worked with OpenAPI? This is how it looks, instead of 1,000 words. I remember writing it manually. If you have to implement API, the best is to do it through OpenAPI and release it to the developers. So there is a block of operations, responses, which invoke models. There's always a UI for it, and this is how it gets represented. You could expand it, and you could work in an example here. And Postman can make mock service based on that. So if you've never used it and you need to work with API design, this is what I recommend you do if you want to minimize your effort. So you can reprogram a file so that it looks nice and it works for developers as well. There's also an editor here. Ideally, it's in build, so you can kill two birds with one stone. Code first versus contract first. Developers receive OpenAPI and then they generate their service. In code first, developers program code of controllers. The problem of contract first is that an open API looks good because it's programmed by analysts and architects, but whatever has been generated in the code looks awful. You could add something quick and dirty, temporary fixes could be added, but still, in the backend, generation is so-so. In code first, we describe first and then generate it in our Confluence. This is the version that I tend to stick to. So we put together a code, generated it in Confluence, and here we forgot something, didn't fix an error, so there has to be an auto-generation for your contract. Every change in contract should affect the code, which is often neglected. I think that's all, and as far as versioning is concerned, I could discuss this with you in the lobby. Hello. Thank you. It was an interesting talk. Regarding the final slide about the role of analysts, if we have code first and it's more popular because auto generation is not so good, if an analyst describes OpenAI, OpenAPI in the draft, then a code is programmed. So does it result in a good spec? In my world of hardcore and enterprise, analysts do not dig that deep. They know that an operation needs to be resolved and how it is resolved and how services will interact is up to the developer. Analysts barely reach the OpenAI level. They get stuck at the level of task description. So analysts would describe something in Confa. We agreed that our analysts specify this at the public open API level. This is a problem for developers. And my second question is about this interesting example with user's address. You could pack everything in the front end and do it in one request. How will you then partition this into sub-components, pairwise, most commonly used?
Well, it depends on what is used more frequently, because here's the avatar. A user could be a full user, or user for list is another story. But if you want to do all the options, this will be torturous. You look at GraphQL. So this would be like an anti-pattern if you want a full list. Usually, a full list is needed for reception. It's not a full update. Another option is to send info through headings like short, medium, full, and then different responses will come back. This is not quite transparent, but you will have to keep like 100 million states. If you need a user without transaction but only with a wallet, what you do, you give all the info with transaction. There's some other cases whereby the heading comes as like what is needed. This is like GraphQL. This is not transparent, but doable. But I don't think you should be using it everywhere. So you said it's not idempotent, but people recommend making even post-idempotent. When front generates an object, and if it tries to create same object with same parameters, then they should not be doubled. You can send post several times because he is put create profile several times, so then the architect will work in such a way that the same object will come back with the same ID. Maybe you could enlighten us on this one. But you can make it idempotent. What I was telling you about is just a set of resume when we work with Appium. Post could be that case, and it's used quite often. So my question was basically, do you believe that every method should be strictly idempotent? Post is not idempotent. When you publish your Appium, then you should put it in the specify in your documentation. For users, unless you're reading your comments, this would look like he creates the same thing twice. And some other questions. Okay, let's gift the T-shirt to whom? To this young man, and also the second T-shirt to this woman, because I will have another one. Thank you very much. Hope what I told you will come in handy, or this would be food for thought. See you again. I will have another presentation together with my wonderful wife. She will be product owner, and I will be an architect. We'll talk about microservices. I will try to convince her why we need to switch to that. Thank you very much. See you.